greetings, everyone. Greetings, Senator. Thank you for joining us. I know there's many places you could be, like on the Hill, voting. And the senator does have some votes, so we're going to get quickly to the heart of the matter. Obviously, voting rights has been on the hearts and minds of lots of people in this country, Democrats, Republicans, and independents, and our democracy writ large. So I want to start there talking about some pushing the conversation forward, given some things you yourself have said as of late. You have called Calais, which is a decision, the most recent decision about the VRA, Jim Crow in new clothes. Yes, he did. Now, I think the deeper issue, frankly, is that we are watching the same playbook that dismantled Reconstruction. After the dismantling of Reconstruction, you have the courts aiding and abetting in what's going on. The state legislatures are moving at record speed. The federal government is here playing a role. And so what does the next phase of this actually look like? Is it enough to just restore the Voting Rights Act, or does it need to be bigger?
Hello, everybody. Good to be here with you. Thank you so much. It's really hard, if not impossible, to overstate how important this moment is. What the Supreme Court did the other day is devastating. It's a massive blow to voting rights in this country. And if there's anything that keeps me up at night, it's that. There are a whole range of issues, right? Mm-hmm. I'm about to go vote in a few minutes. We got a vote going on. But there are a lot of issues we debate every single day. Mm-hmm. But the democracy is the house we live in. And MAGA politicians, some of them on the Supreme Court, are burning and looting the house. And so we have to take it seriously. I have been working ever since I came to the Senate to pass voting rights. I came in the 117th Congress, and we got a whole lot done that Congress. I sure wish we had passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Nothing could be more important. But going forward, we're focused on winning the midterms. We've got to set the table so that when Democrats are back in power, we have to pass the Voting Rights Advancement Act. We've got to do something about all of this dark money that's in our politics that, quite frankly, is behind the Supreme Court.
So along those lines, then, how are you going to get that done? Democrats, it's not as though they haven't had an answer to what Republicans have been doing in terms of a power grab, as I would call it. I think at the end of the day, this is all about power. State legislatures, governors' races, so on and so forth. When it comes to voting rights in America, there have been a number of bills in the House and in the Senate, and none of them have passed. And so what is going to happen differently? Are you endorsing getting rid of the filibuster? How are you going to get it done?
Let me be very clear. No arcane Senate procedure should block people's right to have their voices heard and their votes cast in their democracy. That is my position. And when we are back in power, we've got to pass voting rights. No more hand-wringing, no more delay. You can't fight for the people and then have the people send you into power and not fight to give the people the power for their voices to be heard in their democracy. So we need to pass the Voting Rights Advancement Act, which would ban racial gerrymandering, ban partial gerrymandering, or partisan gerrymandering. I think D.C. statehood is what we need, and we ought to provide a path for other territories of the United States, a democratic path for them to decide whether or not they want statehood. Here we are approaching the 250th anniversary of a nation born fighting taxation without representation. And here we are sitting in this place. So I'm deeply worried. I'm angry that the democracy is on fire. I think the answer to fighting those who are trying to fight the democracy is more democracy, is to make sure that the people that their voices can be heard. And so We need Supreme Court reform.
Okay, let's talk about Supreme Court reform. I was going there next. You, just as we were sitting here, you talked about MAGA politicians, and you said, well, some of them on the Supreme Court. Recently, you called some sitting justices on the Supreme Court political hacks. That's a quote. Look, for decades, I think it is safe to say that both parties, Democrats and Republicans, frankly tried to convince Americans that the court was apolitical. Now, in my estimation, I think the Republican Party apparatus said that, but acted differently. It seems like now both parties are waking up to the fact, or have arrived at the same place, that the court is maybe a little more political than folks let on. So what does court reform look like? Do you think we need more justices on the Supreme Court? Because if the current ones are political hacks, how do you counter that?
Here's what we know. We know that what we are witnessing right now is not working. I'm angry about the dismantling of the Voting Rights Act, Section 2. But the same court that dismantled Section 2 dismantled Section 5. They are also the same court that is responsible for Citizens United. And so while Black voters are at the center of the discussion right now, we can't lose sight of the bigger picture. They are after the coalition, whether it is giving billionaires and heavyweight donors and corporations an outsized impact and influence in our politics through Citizens United, or suppressing the vote by dismantling Section 2, or gerrymandering folks through Section 5, or trying to pass the SAVE Act, which would disproportionately impact women, Black people, brown people, working class people. They are after everyday Americans. And so it would be irresponsible for us not to respond. The court has been reformed before. We certainly need ethics, a code of ethics. Let's try that. That'll be a good first step.
Well, there is currently a code, but it's not enforceable.
Well,
so what? I mean, it seems like this is the early conversation.
That's the way to fix it. We need a code of ethics.
Okay.
And then there are a number of reforms on the table, term limits, expansion of the court wouldn't be the first time. I think given the crisis we're in, Simone, all of those things have to be on the table.
And you are willing to not just have those conversations, but that's a vote you're also willing to take.
Everything should be on the table.
Everything should be on the table. You all heard that. Look, I think that the American people, I think what you just said is refreshing to hear, because I don't know how any politician in this country can credibly say that our democracy is in danger and then not be willing to take the steps to address the democracy being in danger. And so there's a poem by Edgar Guest that talks about doing the things that haven't been done before. Do you think Democrats need to, not just when it comes to the courts, but voting rights, but also our economy, need to do some things that haven't been done before? And if so, what are those things?
We owe it to the people. On the voting rights piece, I just want to, remind everybody that we had every Democrat on board for those voting bills that we were trying to pass.
So what happened?
At the end of the day, there were 2 United States senators who are no longer in the caucus, who were not willing to do what was necessary to pass it. And I thought then that we should have gotten voting rights done. I'm proud to have come into Congress at a time where, when you think about the amount of legislation we passed when I got elected in 21, and we wouldn't have done any of that had I not gotten elected. And John also. Georgia, I just want to say, Georgia saved the whole country. But we got to send John Ossoff back to the United States Senate. But think about what we did at Congress. We passed the American Rescue Plan, which included in that was the child tax credit. So we cut child poverty 40% for 6 months. We passed a bipartisan infrastructure bill. We passed a CHIPS and science bill, the most significant industrial policy we had seen in a very long time. We passed the first gun safety bill in 30 years. We passed the burn pits bill, which helped the veterans. We passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which was the largest investment in clean energy ever in human history, and it capped the cost of prescription drugs, gave Medicaid the ability to negotiate the price of prescription drugs. All of that, and all of those are things that I support. I'm proud that we did it, but we're watching them burn that stuff down right now. We're seeing them undermine it. And if I had all of those things, and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, on the other hand, along with court reform and an expanding democracy, I'd take the voting rights bill over all of those bills. We have to save the democracy.
As we have this conversation, talk about voting on Capitol Hill, there's a piece of legislation, the SCORE Act, that particularly deals with athletics, colleges, so on and so forth. And it was a bipartisan bill, it's my understanding. I bring this up because the Congressional Black Caucus, of which you are a member, the Congressional Black Caucus on the House side, they have said that they are not voting for that legislation or any other legislation like it until the schools and the administrators in the South speak to what is happening on the attack for Black representation and Black voters. I'm wondering your take on this. There have been a lot of folks that have said the athletes at these schools in the South need to speak up. I am somebody that believes the administrators and everybody needs to speak up, not just the athletes and not just the Black athletes. But where do you come down on this? Because there is money to be made in the sports situation here. And I feel like if those folks were speaking up about the attack on our democracy, then maybe things would be happening a little differently. Or maybe you disagree.
I think we all have a role to play, and I'm committed to doing my part. I love this country. I'm willing to take my chances at the end of the day with the people, with democracy. And so, that's what I'm deeply committed to. I'm a child of the South. I was born and raised in Georgia. And, I talk to Andy Young about this all the time. People think about the Civil Rights Movement, which gave us the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, as something that saved Black people. The reality is it saved the country.
Because it was about democracy.
And it especially helped the South. The South would not be enjoying the prosperity that it enjoys. The Atlanta that we know, that you just left this weekend, with the big football stadiums and the super highways and the innovation that's happening in a whole range of human fields, all of that would not be happening on the other side of a Jim Crow curtain. And so we are witnessing right now with this attack on voting rights, Jim Crow and new clothes. We owe it to the whole republic. We owe it to our children to fight for it with all of our might. We need all hands on deck. And the good news is right now, as I'm speaking, Georgia voters are turning out in record numbers. We've got 2 Supreme Court seats up. They're taking it seriously. And at the end of the day, it's really the people. It is the people who are going to take their democracy back so that we can move forward and get some of these incredible things done, whether we're talking about child care or health care or dealing with the housing crisis, where we live in a country where the average age of the first-time homeowner is age 40. We can fix that, but we've got to think a lot bigger than we've been thinking and really take seriously the moment that we're living in.
Let's talk about thinking a bit bigger. You mentioned all of the things that did get done during the first couple years after you came into office in the Senate, and there are some things that didn't get done. You mentioned child care. That was the second part of Build Back Better. And now what we talk about is the affordability crisis in America is just really the care economy. It just keeps getting a new name. I'm wondering if there are any lessons that you learned during those negotiations when it came to the care economy part of Build Back Better, or even the failure of the voting rights bill in the Senate. What lessons did you learn that you will take into this next fight? Because there is a real chance that Democrats take back the United States Senate, and that's not something I would have said a year ago.
Courage. I mean, we need moral courage in this moment. And at every inflection point in this country, whether we're talking about the civil rights movement or women's suffrage or the advancements of members of the LGBTQ community fighting for their humanity, it's just been people who are willing to stand up and center the concerns of ordinary people. And so that's what we need in this moment. We need that kind of leadership. And, you know, as I sit here, here's what I'm not about to do. I'm not about to give in to those who are trying to weaponize despair. Because we'll win some of these battles, and if we're honest, we'll lose some. We'll win some elections. We'll lose some elections. But the battle we cannot lose is the battle between hope and despair. Because if we lose that battle, then we stop fighting. And then when we stop fighting, we don't. Here's why I can't stop. I mean, you see me sitting here. I'm a United States Senator, but I'm also a product of good public policy, good federal legislation. I'm a Head Start alum, long before any of those other degrees. You know, I was a kid in Head Start. That program gave me access to literacy and learning and a love of reading. And then when I was in high school, my principal summoned me to the office. I thought I was in trouble. She wanted to tell me about a program called Upward Bound, a good federal program that put a kid growing up in public housing on a college campus on Saturdays and on the weekends. So I knew I could go to college because I was already on the campus. And then when I got ready to attend Morehouse, it was Pell Grants and low-interest student loans that provided a path for me. And so every day I'm thinking about that kid because it would be harder for me to do those things now.
All of those programs you just mentioned have been cut under this administration.
Yeah, a tax on the Department of Education. And so I'm fighting for that kid every single day who grew up on Cape Street and kids like that all across my state and all across our country.
You know, I know we need to let you go. The last thing I'll say is often you are a pastor as well as a senator. And somebody said, mm-hmm. And you pastored the same church in Ebenezer Baptist Church that Dr. King
That's right.
once helmed. And I have to wonder, oftentimes he is regularly quoted, you know, the arc of the moral universe, it bends toward justice. And I find myself struggling right now with the question of, does it bend on its own? Or do people, it doesn't just bend on its own. People have to bend it. And so you talk about hope. What gives you hope in this moment that the people are going to bend the arc of the moral universe toward justice?
Absolutely. It does not bend on its own. That we've got to bend that arc. And it has always been the people. I'll close very quickly, and nobody believes a Baptist preacher when he says, as I close.
That usually means another 10 minutes, but he has votes.
But look, I walk around Atlanta, Georgia, which means I get to hang out with giants. Mm-hmm. C.T. Vivian, I was watching a video of him earlier today, the courage with which he stood up to just brute force fighting for voting rights. John Lewis, my parishioner, is gone. Andy Young is still with us. He tells me this story about when they passed the Civil Rights Bill into law. Dr. King went to see President Johnson, and Johnson was celebrating the fact that they had passed the Civil Rights Bill into law. Dr. King said, great. And without skipping a beat, he said, that's great. We need voting rights. Didn't waste a moment. And the president kept saying, Martin, you're right. I just don't have the power to do that right now. I just don't have the power. And they left the meeting, and the staff was feeling all demoralized, like some of us now, and dejected, and said, what are we going to do? The president said he can't get his voting rights. He said he doesn't have the power. Dr. King said, well, if the president doesn't have the power, I guess we're going to have to go to the South and get him some. And so that's what we got to do. We got to go to the South and get the people some power because when we stand up, we win.
That is a perfect place to end. Senator Raphael Warnock of the great state of Georgia, thank you for your time.
Thank you.